Dear people watching and listening, Assalamu alaikum. Kindly like and share this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please support my channel by contributing to my Patreon account so that I can continue making the audiobook series. Chapter 13 concludes part 1, that is the conquest of Egypt, which happened under the Rashiduncaliphate from 639 AD to 646 AD. The part 2 will tell in detail about the conquest of North Africa. Start of Chapter 13. The Second Conquest of Alexandria. The Romans in Alexandria who submitted to Muslim rule upon the fall of the city were by no means a loyal lot of people. Those who could get away to Byzantium did so, but more than 150,000 stayed behind. According to the customs of war, they were technically captives, as were their womenfolk and children, and the Muslims had every right to take them into slavery. In spite of this, the conquerors showed extreme kindness and permitted them to keep their homes, their wealth, and their kin. They could live their normal lives and had complete freedom of worship, all in return for 2 dinars every year from adult males. But the Romans remained a disloyal lot. They began to hatch plots against the Muslims. Quite soon after the conquest of Alexandria, as early as 22 Hijri, when amrbinalaas was still in Tripoli, Maqauqas wrote to him that the Romans were planning to break their pact with the Muslims. Maqauqas had remained true to his given word and proved a faithful ally to the Muslims. Upon the return of Amr from Tripoli, however, all remained quiet and there was no disturbance of any kind. Amr's prestige and military stature were sufficient to discourage seditious efforts in the province. In late 23 or early 24 Hijri, that is from 644 to 645 AD, the Christian mayor of Ikhna came to see Amr. Ikhna was one of the coastal districts of Lower Egypt near Alexandria, and its mayor, a Roman by the name of Talma, was in close touch with his fellow countrymen in the city. The man had some objections to the payment of the jizya and asked amrbinalaas something about it, to which apparently Amr gave no satisfactory answer. But he said to the mayor, "You are a treasure house for us. The more you give us, the more we do for you. The less you give us, the less we do for you." For some reason, this statement angered Talma. He went back to his district and to Alexandria, and after meeting other Romans, sailed to Constantinople to put his problem before Constans, grandson of Heraclius, who now sat upon the imperial throne. At about this time, Constans received complaints from many others in Alexandria, the basic theme of the complaints being the disgrace of having to pay the jizya. The letters which he received also told him that the Muslims had left a very small garrison in Alexandria, only 1,000 men, and they urged him to come and recapture Alexandria while it was still vulnerable. About now, the effect of the change of command in Egypt also began to be felt. Abdullah bin Sa'd bin Abi Sarh, this is how most historians refer to him, but we shall shorten the name to a manageable Abdullah bin Sa'd, was able enough to run the province and his competence was not disputed. The special thing about his administration was his flair for getting money out of people. Where amrbinalaas had stood up for the people of Egypt against a caliph as strong as Umar, Abdullah bin Sa'd sought to oblige his benefactor by getting more out of them for Medina, and since the bulk of the taxpayers were Christians, the oppressive methods of Abdullah pleased neither the Romans nor the Copts. The flames of discontent were fanned by Abdullah's administrative methods, and the fact that the iron hand of amrbinalaas was no longer there to keep the Egyptians in check encouraged Constantinople to attempt a comeback in Egypt. It took the empire time to mount the invasion. A large force was concentrated, armed and equipped for the operation, and a fleet of 300 ships was prepared to convey the invasion force by sea to the Egyptian coast. A unit named Manuel was appointed commander of the expeditionary force, and Telma, mayor of Ikhna, would act as guide. Manuel's orders were to take Alexandria and then advance and defeat the Muslims in battle at Babylon, after which the entire land would be cleared of them. In early 25 Hijri, 646 AD, the Roman fleet appeared at Alexandria and sailed into the harbor. The Muslims were too few to defend such a large city against such a powerful invasion force, and they seemed to have relaxed their vigilance ever since Amrbinalaas was sacked. The Romans landed in Alexandria and were joined by the local Roman populace, which rose as one man against its Muslim masters. Most of the garrison perished in the fight, but many Muslims got away to carry the sad tale to Fustat. It was a serious situation that faced Abdullah bin Saad, a major invasion of Egypt which threatened the very presence of the Muslims in the land. But he was never put to the test of dealing with the situation. The Muslims in Egypt were so alarmed by this unforeseen turn of events and had so little faith in their new governor that they sent a delegation to Medina to see the Caliph. They urged Usman to reappoint amrbinalaas over Egypt so that he could free the land of the Roman menace. Only he could do it, for only he had the required knowledge of war and experience of high command, and moreover, he was feared by the Romans and thus more likely to succeed against them. Usman saw the logic of the demand of the Muslims of Egypt. He appealed to Amr to return to his post, to take command in Egypt once again, and deal with the Romans. Amr responded like a true soldier. He lost no time in getting back to Fustat as governor and military commander, charged with the mission of expelling the Romans from Egypt and re-establishing Muslim rule firmly in the land. By now the Romans were in full occupation of Alexandria and the surrounding countryside, and that built up a considerable strength of men and material. They had even begun to advance towards Fustat. The Copts by and large stayed away from them, but some living in Alexandria and adjacent districts believed that the Roman sun was rising again, and threw in their lot with their former masters. The return of amrbinalaas gave a tremendous lift to Muslim spirits in Egypt. Everyone prepared for battle with eager anticipation or grim determination, depending upon the individual mood, and Amr got down to planning the operation. Agents informed him about the advance of the Romans and their intention of battling the Muslims in Fustat. Many Muslims were of the view that the Romans should be confined to Alexandria and dealt with in an offensive campaign with all possible speed. Kharija bin Huzaifa said to Amr, "Attack them before their strength increases. There is no assurance that all Egypt will not revolt." "No," replied Amr, "let them come to me. They will cause trouble to those by whom they pass, and Allah will disgrace some with others." This was a conflict between two strategies and makes an interesting study for the military student. Amr chose the one of drawing the Romans away from their base, stretching and weakening their lines of communication, and letting Roman indiscipline, which was poor by the standard of the new Muslim ethics, further antagonize the local inhabitants who would then be even happier at the Muslim deliverance. He accepted the disadvantage of losing territory and perhaps the loyalty of Amr let the Romans advance without opposition, merely keeping them under observation. The Romans advanced on the east side of the Nile, that is on the delta, rather than on the west or desert side. This gave them certain advantages. As Romans, they felt more at ease in the green, cultivated region compared with the desert boundary, which suited the Arabs. Coming this way, they would not have to cross the Nile in the face of Muslim opposition, as at Babylon. and this line of advance could place them astride Muslim lines of communication with Arabia, thus putting the Muslims in a terrible strategical position. It was a well-chosen line of advance and posed a serious threat to the Muslims. The Romans advanced by road and river, that is, along the east bank of the Nile, and with a flotilla of river craft moving in the water, which they intended to use as warships. They advanced slowly and deliberately. As the Roman army moved from town to town, Roman soldiers drank the townspeople's wine, ate the townspeople's foods, and plundered the townspeople. The reaction among the Copts, as Amr had anticipated, was one of revulsion and anger. The Romans had advanced about halfway to Fustat when the Muslims started their counter-move. Amr left Fustat with an army of 15,000 men and advanced along the east bank of the Nile on the road to Alexandria. The Romans came upriver by road and river. The Muslims went downriver by road, and the two armies met in the area of Nikiyu, the present Shabshir Tamalai. We do not know the Roman strength here, but they must have been stronger than the Muslim army, or they would not have ventured out of Alexandria. There was nothing of strategical importance in Nakius. It was just a large town where the two armies happened to meet, and there was no tactical significance in the ground around Nakius. It was flat, cultivated, featureless terrain with the Nile on the west and the delta extending to the east. Having met and squared off, the two forces went into camp, in preparation for the Battle of Nakius. Since there were no tactical features here, the type of battle fought could be fought in dozens of places along the bank of the Nile. The interesting point of this battle was not the use of ground, it was flat and dull, but the unusual tactics employed by the Romans. The following day the Muslims deployed for battle on the right bank of the Nile. Their left rested on the Nile and was formed by a cavalry regiment under Sharik bin Sumay. It was Amr's intention to seize the initiative and attack the Romans and Copts, but he would await the forming up of the enemy before ordering his men forward. The Romans were emerging from their camp and falling into neat formations. But what surprised the Muslims was that large numbers of them were embarking in boats on the river bank. When the Roman preparations were complete, the main body of their army advanced on land towards the Muslims, while a sizable group sailed up the river in boats. It was when the Roman army was in bow range, less than a quarter of a mile, that the Muslims realized the Roman scheme. The army stopped and started a heavy barrage of arrows against the Muslims, while the river group continued to sail till it had reached the Muslim flank. Then this group also opened up with bows, and the Muslims found themselves under fire from two sides. Most of them had been sheltering behind their shields against the arrows coming from the land force, but now their flank was exposed, and they could not protect themselves with the same shields from front and flank. It was a remarkable tactic employed by Manuel the Eunuch, an attack from the front with firepower to fix the attention of the enemy, then an attack from the flank with firepower in a manner most damaging to the enemy. The Muslims suffered grievously from the crossfire. Many were wounded. Amr's horse received an arrow in the chest and rolled on the ground, the rider dismounting hastily from his back to mount another. The confusion increased in the Muslim ranks as more and more of them fell out, wounded by arrows, and no one could tell them how to deal with the heavy arrow fire from two directions. The Romans were clearly superior in this kind of warfare, with their better bows with longer ranges and heavier arrows. The Muslim regiment under Sharik bin Sumay, being at the corner and subjected to direct fire from front and flank, took the heaviest losses. But not knowing what else to do, nor being able to do otherwise, and not being willing to give up the battlefield, the Muslims hung on and took it. What the Roman general had put into effect was an entirely new form of warfare for the Muslims. It was like a combined operation with land and naval forces acting in concert and bringing maximum firepower to bear upon a single enemy. The ships in the Nile were mobile forts maneuvering on the flanks of the Muslims with no one to dispute their movement on the water. They were like mobile artillery approaching the Muslims from an unexpected direction, while the main army engaged the Muslim front with its own weapons. And by forming a broader base of attack, they were able to bring a much heavier volume of fire to bear upon the Muslims. The Romans really had stocked up with arrows to cause the maximum possible damage to the Muslims before they closed in for the final shock action. Then the Roman flotilla sailed back from the flank of the Muslims and pulled into the river bank near the main body of their army. Here the soldiers in the boats disembarked and formed up along with the main body, creating a battle formation several ranks deep, which the Muslims saw as ranks behind ranks. As soon as the formation was complete, the Roman army again started a barrage of arrows, with the missiles landing like hail upon the Muslims. It was Manuel's intention to take full advantage of Roman expertise in missile warfare by keeping the Muslims at arm's length and not letting them close up for close quarter battle, at which the Muslims excelled with their greater courage and stamina. And once the Muslims had been disorganized and unbalanced, Manuel kept them that way and did not permit them to regain their balance. He allowed no let-up, so the arrow fire went on and the Muslims were unable to retaliate because of the long range at which the action was being fought. Then, when Manuel thought that the Muslims had been sufficiently softened up and would now be unable to resist a charge, he ordered the Roman army forward to assault the disorganized Muslim ranks. The arrows ceased as the Romans closed up and struck with their short swords at their adversaries. They were in well-organized, well-formed, well-controlled regiments. The Muslims were relieved at the cessation of the deadly hail of arrows, but then came the ground attack. Many welcomed this as a more familiar form of warfare, and met the Roman attack head-on with sword and dagger. But the Muslim army really had been softened up by the Roman archers. Some of the cohesion and compactness had been lost. One Muslim regiment, the cavalry left wing under Sharik, actually broke and bolted, and it was a long time before the efforts of Sharik to get them back into action could bear fruit. The rest of the Muslim army fell back. It was not a retreat. The Muslims did not turn their backs upon the Romans and flee from the battlefield. They just pulled out and away from the Roman grip. After moving back a short distance, they stopped, and the Romans, either in the mistaken belief that they had won and the Muslims were abandoning the battlefield, or through just plain relief that the dreaded desert swordsmen were not giving them a harder time, stopped where they stood. They did not move forward. Thus ended the second phase of the Roman attack, the first being the arrow engagement. There was a lull in battle. The Romans waited, hoping that the Muslims would go away. The Muslims waited, hoping that the Romans would not go away. And fate, knowing that inaction is bad for soldiers, produced a magnificent duel to occupy the minds of the belligerents before the next phase could begin. A splendidly dressed Roman officer, mounted on a magnificent horse and wearing armor studded with gold, emerged from the Roman ranks and threw a general challenge for single combat. The challenge was taken up by a Muslim named Homal, Abu Mazhij. Homal was a lean, wiry Arab, famed for his courage and skill, who had distinguished himself in combat many times. The two stalwarts met in the space between the two armies and began to fight. They fought for a long time with the lance, with neither one gaining an advantage. The Muslims on the south side and the Romans and Copts on the north watched in breathless silence and roared their approval whenever their champion won a point. But the struggle of the two gallants went on relentlessly. each knowing that it would end in the death of one of them. Then the Roman officer dropped his lance and drew his sword. The Muslim did likewise. Amrbinalaas was very fond of Homal and thought of him as one of his best young warriors. As he drew his sword, Amr shouted in encouragement. "O Abu Mazij," the young stalwart replied, "ready," and threw himself at the Roman. The two armies, still in battle formation with the western flank of each resting on the Nile, watched the next round of this mortal combat fought with sword and shield. This also went on for a long time. Both fighters were accomplished swordsmen, and neither could gain an advantage over the other. Then the Roman, who was bigger and stronger, launched a furious assault, and was able to badly wound the Muslim. At the same time he lunged at his adversary to grapple with him with his bare hands. The Muslim had just enough time to draw his dagger, and as the Roman came on, plunged it into the Roman's throat. The big fellow fell, and after a few moments lay still. Some days later Homal also died of his wounds. Amr was deeply grieved at the loss and himself took part in carrying the bier at the funeral, and sent the body of the departed warrior for burial at Muqattam, the new cemetery of the faithful. By the time Homal had won this grand duel, the Muslims were ready for battle. Sharik with his regiment was also back, and had resumed his position on the left of the Muslim front. Amrbinalaas gave the signal to attack, and the Muslim army of nearly 15,000 men heaved into action. It made a straight, orderly advance towards the enemy. The Romans were prepared for them, and the two armies met with a clash of steel and muscle. General battle was on. This was the Muslim way of fighting: close quarter, short-range battle, sword and dagger, courage and chivalry. In the preceding phases, with the battle being conducted mainly with bow and arrow, the Romans had held every advantage, but in this kind hand-to-hand fighting the Muslims were superior. The battle raged for some time with the Muslims attacking fiercely and the Romans resisting stubbornly, but the Romans had lost their advantage with the end of the missile phase. It was now the hour of the Muslim, and as the assault of the desert warriors increased in violence and ferocity, the Roman army broke and fled. Units and groups and individuals fell back. The Muslims came on after the Romans. In this phase of battle, no one could excel the Arab of the desert. The pursuit of a defeated foe, and this time the Arabs of Amrbinalaas excelled themselves. They pounced upon the receding backs of the Romans, and the imperial soldiers stretched themselves to get away from the horror of the pursuing Arab hosts. The retreat of the Roman army, harassed by the Muslim pursuit, did not stop till it had got to Alexandria. Here the imperial soldiers quickly took shelter within the walls of the fort, and the Muslims arrived to find an Amrbinalaas looked angrily at the walls of Alexandria. He had much to be angry about. At Nakius he had nearly been beaten by the clever tactics of his opponent. It was only his own heroic efforts which saved the army from a shameful end, and then led it into the attack, which finally ended with a clear Muslim victory. Perhaps Amr also thought of Caliph Usman, and that never helped his temper. He was now looking at the walls of Alexandria as he had done 5 years before. The Romans were just as strong in their fortifications now as they had been then. He would have to go through with it all over again. There would be the same ally. There would be the same sallies, the same counter-sallies, the same assault against the walls, the same breaching of defenses and securing of battlements, and all the vicious, merciless fighting which this kind of warfare entailed. And all this because he had been removed from command and a lesser man put in his place on grounds other than professional qualification. Amr swore that he would not let this kind of situation occur again, at least not in Alexandria. He swore that if Allah gave him victory, He would demolish the walls of Alexandria so that it would be like the house of an adulteress, accessible from all sides. The siege did not last long. The initial phase was one of heavy bombardment by both sides. Roman catapults mounted on the battlements pounded the Muslims whenever they came close to the walls. Amr too had catapults constructed, and with these machines he answered the Roman fire boulder for boulder, and then went on bombarding the inside of Alexandria. What actual damage these catapults did is not known. Then, as luck would have it, a citizen of Alexandria approached the Muslims, named Ibn Basama. He was one of the gatekeepers of the city and made an offer. If the Muslims would guarantee his safety and the safety of his family, and assured him that he would remain in possession of his property, he would open his gate at a time suitable to the Muslims and let them in. The gate which he was in charge of was near the Bridge of Solomon. Amr accepted the gatekeeper's offer, and the night and the time for the assault were fixed. On that night and at that time Ibn Basama would open the gate. It was now about the middle of 25 Hijri, mid-646 AD. Ibn Basama opened his gate and the Muslims poured into the city. The Romans who opposed the Muslim entry were cut down in no time, and Roman regiments rushing up to hold the Muslim trust were pushed back. The fury of the Arabs was terrible as they wreaked havoc upon the city. His men were no less angry than amrbinalaas and determined to inflict such punishment upon the Romans that they would never again dare to set foot in Egypt. Many Romans got away in their boats to Byzantium, but a large number fell before the Muslim assault. It was a wild and bloody last act in the drama of the Second Battle of Alexandria. There was much slaughter. Then someone spoke to Amr about the helplessness of the enemy and the need for mercy. Amr was not by nature a merciful man, but the message got through. He at once ordered that the swords be lifted, that is, the cessation of fighting, and as quickly the army obeyed. At the place where Amr stopped the slaughters, a mosque was later built and named the Mosque of Mercy, to commemorate Amr's act of mercy. The Second Battle of Alexandria was over. The city had been conquered a second time. Although large numbers of Romans fell in this battle, mainly in the slaughter inside the city, only 22 Muslims were killed. The Roman general Manuel the Eunuch, having lost the battle, redeemed himself in death. Talma, the mayor of Ichna, who had been one of the instigators and had schemed to bring about the Roman campaign to take Alexandria, was captured by the Muslims. He was brought before amrbinalaas. The Muslims could think of no treatment more just than to cut off Talma's head, and urged Amr to do so, but Amr decided to spare the man's life. No, he said, let him go and bring us another army. The contempt with which the Muslim commander spoke of the Roman army was like a slap in Talma's face. Amr then sent for a set of fine clothes and had Talma dressed in them. He did the mayor honor. Then again he said, bring us once again the likes of this army. Talma had nothing to say. Now other Muslims came forward and asked, what if you go back to the Emperor of Rome? The poor fellow admitted, if I go to him, he will kill me. Relieved that his life had been spared, thankful for the generous treatment of the Muslims, repentant at his disloyalty to the Muslim power, disillusioned at Roman inability to hold Alexandria, Talma became a good citizen again and no longer objected to the payment of the jizya. His fellow Romans in Egypt now felt the same way about things. The next few days were spent in reorganization and resettlement. The entire wall that surrounded Alexandria was taken down, demolished to the last stone, and the city was made, as amrbinalaas had sworn, like the house of an adulteress, except accessible from all sides. New plans were made for the future defense of Alexandria and other vulnerable areas. Amr divided the army into 4 parts. One part would stay in Alexandria as the garrison of the city. One part would watch the northern coast of Egypt, and half the army would stay in the Muslim capital of Fustat, dispersed when required for ease of supplies and maintenance. The garrisons would be changed around every 6 months. Then the people of the Egyptian towns and villages, which had borne the brunt of the recent Roman advance from Alexandria to Naxos, came to amrbinalaas. The Copts lamented how they had been plundered by the Romans, how they had lost all that they had of goods and animals. Amr had the plundered property collected, and whatever could be identified by individual Copts as theirs was returned to them. Then some of the more intelligent Copts complained of a breach of trust by the Muslims, referring to the Muslim plan of letting the Roman advance without opposition from Alexandria. They said, "You were not right to do to us what you did. You were required to fight to defend us because we are your responsibility, and we have not broken our pact." The Copts were right. The jizya was paid by non-Muslims to earn them exemption from military service and a guarantee for their defense against external enemies. In this case, they had paid the tax, but the state had not defended them against the Romans, not entirely. Amr was overcome by remorse. "Oh," he said, "I wish I had fought them as they came out of Alexandria." Amrbinalaas left his Greek slave Wardan as administrator of Alexandria and returned with the bulk of the army to Fustat. He had inflicted a decisive defeat upon the Romans, saved Egypt, and restored Muslim rule in the land. He had every right to be satisfied with himself, and every right to hope that a grateful caliph would treat him with honor and leave him in undisputed command of Egypt. But Usman had other ideas. He was known to be a very kind-hearted man. He wanted his foster brother to get a good job. Moreover, Abdullah bin Saad had been able to get more revenue out of Egypt by his harsh methods than Amr had done in his time. Where Amr had collected 12 million a year, Abdullah bin Saad had upped that figure to 14 million. It was nice to have a tax collector like Abdullah bin Saad if one did not care what happened to the taxpayer, and Usman liked the extra state income from Egypt. Then he got letters from both Amrbinalaas and Abdullah bin Saad, each complaining against the other. Usman thought he had the answer. He sent for Amr, and when the letter arrived, the Caliph asked how it would be if Amrbinalaas remained as military commander, responsible for the defense of Egypt, while Abdullah bin Saad handled the financial side of the administration. Amr was nothing if not quick-witted. He replied, "In that case I would be like the man holding the horns of the cow while another milks it." Again Amrbinalaas was out of a job. Again Abdullah bin Saad was governor of all Egypt. Amr had been there only 1 month after the reconquest of Alexandria, before he was out again. He would not return to his favorite province for 13 years till the time of Muawiyah. Amr was very angry with Usman and bore him a great deal of ill will. He felt deeply the injustice of his removal after the services which he had rendered. He never had anything nice to say about Usman. In fact, he said a lot that was not very nice. At times there would be serious altercations between the two, neither of whom had an affectionate regard for the other. Later in Usman's caliphate, when serious discontent had arisen in the world of Islam against his rule, Amr even took to inciting people against Usman. On a certain occasion, when a great deal of tax money had been sent by Abdullah bin Saad to Medina, and it was in Caliph Usman's house, Amr also walked in. In order to drive home the point about Abdullah being a better financial manager than Amr, and producing more from Egypt than Amr had done, Usman said, "O father of Abdullah," Abdullah was the son of Amr and he was often so addressed, "O father of Abdullah, after you the she-camel in Egypt has been giving more milk." Amr snapped back, that is because you have starved her young. End of chapter. Here concludes the part 1 of the book, that is the conquest of Egypt. Part 2 will tell in detail about the conquest of North Africa.